How many of you are prepared for an incident like this? Get my new book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and I will teach you to think like an attacker so you can truly defend yourself. Don't just react, act. Available for pre-order now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Sheep No More. Get it.
My name is Jonathan Gillum.
And this is The Experts. This is Jonathan Gillum, and this is The Experts on Facebook Live, Twitter, and somewhat on YouTube. And folks, today, I think it's going to be an important show today. That's why I wore a collared shirt. I didn't put a jacket on because I'm a working man. But we are going to discuss this walkout that they had at these schools today, and how it's really just another communist ploy to weaken the Constitution. And I don't think enough people understand the Bill of Rights. I'm no scholar, but I know enough about the Bill of Rights to understand why it was created and why it should not be infringed upon. So we're going to talk about that. I'm really astounded at how many people that I know and love are okay with changing the Second Amendment and infringing on the Constitution, some of them even veterans. So let's talk about it. I have a feeling this is going to get a little heated today. I forgot. Let me share this. Make sure that you're retweeting it on Twitter, and make sure that you share it on Facebook. I don't know what we do on YouTube. Just make sure that you subscribe to the show, or to my page on YouTube. Make sure that you follow me on Twitter and like my page on Facebook. And again, by the end of this show, we should have several hundred retweets and shares, and so we can repopulate everything. I mean, I've heard from so many people that they're being, whether you call it shadow banned or whatever you call it, Twitter and Facebook are, and I know YouTube is as well, but I've never really had that big of a following on YouTube. But on Twitter and Facebook, you can clearly see where they are just not allowing that much stuff to be posted. And I've noticed, and somebody brought up to me today, my buddy Eric, that he believes, anyway, a lead up to the elections that are going to be coming up real soon, that his theory is that they are literally trying to squash any type of conversation that people may be having with a conservative slant. I mean, again, this show, I know I say this every night, but I really want people to recognize what's happening. This show, as of a couple of months ago, was reaching on Facebook 1 million pages a night. And then within a couple of days, it went down. Last night's show reached 3,000 people. That means it went across. It was distributed to pages, even though several people shared it. It was only going to 3,000 other pages, and it goes across their news feeds as it populates Facebook. Not happening now. So definitely stuff is happening. I did an interview with a podcast where I forgot what it's called, but I can tell you real quick. They actually did let's see, it is veteransonthemove.com, and I went and copied the link, and they interviewed me about my book and my experience in life, and I tried to repost it, and it wouldn't, on Twitter, it wouldn't post. The tweet wouldn't post. I asked somebody else to do it, same thing. But then the same individual has a shadow account on Twitter, and that one was able to post. Now, what's interesting about that is my friend is very conservative. He's outspoken. I'm conservative. I'm outspoken. But his shadow account is not. So it's very interesting how it was able to populate on that smaller, non-conservative account. Just saying. Not so much that I'm being a conspiratorial person. It's just the fact that things are happening, and it's very, very strange, which is going to lead me into what we're talking about today. Again, everybody texts me at the same time when I start my show. So let's discuss a couple of things that have bothered me tremendously about this walkout today. Now, again, tell your friends, especially if they're liberal, that they should be watching tonight's show, because this is stuff that you will want to share with them. It's stuff that if you can't talk about, I'll talk about it for you. Let me turn on my Twitter account over here to make sure I got the right numbers going. Let's discuss. So we got bigger numbers on Twitter tonight than we have on Facebook, which is strange, just strange. For a platform that I was having hundreds and hundreds of people tuning in, Facebook has really squashed the show. Whatever, we'll deal with it. As long as Twitter's coming through for us tonight. Okay, this walkout today. A lot of young people participated in this. Let's just start from the very beginning, okay? A lot of students participated in this that didn't care one way or the other. That's a given. You had a lot of students that were causing trouble. I know in Chicago they had bricks and they were breaking out windows and looting. Here in New York they had kids with fireworks and firecrackers scaring people. You're always going to have your bad kids whenever you release them out into the general public like that, which is I'm going to get to what I think is stupid when it comes to this overall walkout today. You had teachers who I know are conservative. Well, let me back up to the students again. You had students that don't feel as though they should walk out because they fully understand the reality of what these walkouts were about. They weren't about honoring the 17 kids in Florida that were killed. People think that's what it was about. But if you look at the basis of the people who organize these events and who fund these events and who get them on television, and if you look at the networks that cover them as something that is, they basically give them a propaganda type spin, then you will realize, which we're going to talk about here shortly, that it really has nothing to do with the 17 kids that died in Florida. That's the absolute truth. So there was a lot of kids that didn't want to march, and if they stayed there, of course they're not going to do it alone. Maybe they had a group of friends that they hang with, and they're all Second Amendment, or they're all believe in the Constitution, or maybe they just don't believe that they should be out of class. Those kids could severely end up being ostracized or bullied by leftists in these schools. And and the teachers. Let's be honest. There are leftists in these schools nowadays. Teachers who are leftists in these schools. We know that's a fact. And you can't expect a child or a young adult who is in this social environment to say, no, I'm not going to do it, because unless they're, a big football star or a big brute or one of the popular people, they're going to get ostracized. And I think it was a terrible display of pressuring kids into doing something that they don't want to do, and also taking kids and putting them into a political mindset that they really have not had the ability to think through on their own. The majority of these people have not, because they're indoctrinated either by their parents who've been indoctrinated, or they're indoctrinated by the school systems that are highly, highly leftist. So this should be bothering you if you're a parent, or if you're just a member of society in this country. This should be bothering you very, very bad, because the majority of these schools did not give the parents, and this even happened in private schools, of which I'm not going to say the name of the place, but there was one particular private school in New York that somebody I know sends their kids to, and they didn't even notify. And this is a Catholic private school. A Catholic private school that has never had a walkout in response to the billions, with a B, of young children that have been aborted inside, sometimes with mothers who do this as a form of birth control. You've never seen a walkout at this school or any of the other Catholic schools. You've never seen any of the schools take up a position upon whether or not, regardless of what they believe is a woman's right, that they should find some other way to save these lives. They've never done that. And I was appalled at this Christian school that did not inform the parents that they were going to do this. Now, it shouldn't be a surprise to us, but the leftist ideology, if you're Catholic, you should have a real problem with this. Because the leftist, whether or not you agree with gun control or whatever, the leftist ideology of protesting and manipulation of young people in order to indoctrinate them in the school system is alive and well, and happened in some of your Christian schools today. And trust me on this, if communism ever gets a hold in this country, Christians will be one of the first groups that get persecuted. Just look at history. So we talked about the children that walked out today, or didn't walk out. This particular parent that I know went and got their kid and was fuming at the fact that they were not told and given a choice, or the fact that they pay for this school with $20,000 a year or more, and they're allowing the children to miss a day of school for something that is not going to affect anything. That in itself is infuriating. So the fact is, whether it's a private school that you feel protected from the public school narratives, it may not be that protected anymore. They are still getting indoctrinated even in private schools. So let's talk about the staff. So we know that a lot of teachers in this country are not just liberal, they are far left. I know teachers from all over the country that I've talked to on my radio shows that I've hosted, or that I just know personally, and they are conservative, or they're just not leftist. They may not even be that conservative, but they definitely are not a leftist, and they are bullied. They have some of them in the case of, like in South Carolina, I talked to a woman who is not liberal. She's conservative. She's also white. And what happened in her school is that if she was caught on social media talking politics, she would be called in and reprimanded and possibly fired. Yet it was not uncommon for minority teachers to be able to say whatever they want and not get in trouble on social media, as well as literally hitting kids in class that were trying to fight them or cursing them out, whereas if you were a Caucasian teacher, you would be fired for that. So we do see in the school system not only a bias for minorities and against however you want to call it, non-minority teachers. I think that whole minority thing is another communist ploy to get people divided. But we also see that if you are a conservative or a supporter of the Second Amendment, you are not going to last long unless you keep that under wraps. That is a fact, and I know it firsthand from teachers who have suffered or have seen other people suffer, so they kept their mouth shut. So we know that this atmosphere exists. We know that both the Catholicism, Christianity, their churches across the country, the school system, the educational sector, we know that they have been indoctrinated and they have been infiltrated by people that, this is back in the 60s, that people were a part of the communist movement infiltrated these facilities. We know that for a fact. We know that for a fact because we got it from their writings. We also know that the Muslim Brotherhood, which should be designated a terrorist group, was deeply embedded with the communist movement in the 60s. We know that for a fact because we found their papers when they made a big bust back in the 80s of a Muslim Brotherhood group that were planning attacks in the United States. They found the literature that showed, I've had some people here talking about this before on this show, and they found the literature showing what they plan to do and how they plan to do it and working together. We now see the fruition of all these different things, whether it be the ultra leftist movement of the clergy in the Catholic Church, preachers and pastors in the non-Catholic Christian side of the church. I don't like to use that word. What's the word that everybody uses when they describe Christians, as though we're all, anyway, I don't like to use any word but Christian, okay? I don't like when people go down the road of trying to name different denominations if you're either Christian or not. But these Christian churches have been infiltrated along with Catholicism. We have proof of it. We know that it's the fact, where they've gone in and they've gotten people into the priesthood. They've gotten people into pastors into churches with the sole intent of subverting the Christian religion. We know that for a fact. So, along with that, we do know that the educational sector was the same. That it happened in the 60s. Bill Ayers, the Weather Underground, all these people. Saul Alinsky said it himself. Instead of going out and doing things overtly, he went into the educational sector. Saul Alinsky, a confessed communist, the mentor of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. Saul Alinsky, one of the biggest treasonous Americans that ever lived, went into the educational sector and worked to subvert it. So we know that for years and years, and it just gets worse through generations, that these teachers have been subverted. And so when they look and hear the communist type propaganda, it may not be, if you talk to these teachers and you said, "Are you a communist?" They'd say, "No, I'm not a communist. I'm an American. I love my freedom." And so, but yet they have been so indoctrinated that they believe and will fall for communist rhetoric, at the drop of a hat. Now, I may stop using the word communism and start using the word globalism, but the only reason I continue to use the word communism is because ultimately what globalists want is the same thing that Karl Marx wanted or Lenin wanted. They just want it on a global scale. And the way they're going to do it is by subverting the United States, the only real superpower left on the earth, by working that same magic around the globe. You see what's happened to Australia or to Spain or to France or to Great Britain. They're trying to do that here. Those were templates to get to the king of the hill, which is the United States. So we know that this has happened in the educational sector. So the teachers are totally indoctrinated. The administrators, who by and large are teachers themselves, the superintendents, the principals, all these people are indoctrinated. And so what do? Whenever anybody starts talking about things like the Second Amendment and gun control, which is ever since the 60s has been a hot topic when it comes to communist subversion, evangelical, that's the word I was looking for earlier. Thank you, Maureen. I don't like that word evangelical, by the way. I think that is another way to categorize Christians into a corner. And if you're a Christian, stop using that word because it doesn't mean anything. It's just another way to make you sound like, oh, you're this kind of Christian or you're that kind of Christian. Just forget about it and get away from those type of definitions. So, getting back on what I'm saying, we know that all these things have occurred, and we know that the schools have been fully indoctrinated. So these teachers, although they may not see themselves as communist, when communist rhetoric that has been spun up since the 60s, and you can research this, which they don't do, and the motivation behind it, which they don't understand, they think it's because of, they want to keep the schools safer, yet they don't do anything to keep the schools safer. They don't. Or any location for that matter. They just specifically go after the Second Amendment. And the same thing with the First Amendment. We know that during Trump's campaign, I watched numerous shows where they were having rallies down here in New York City where people were saying that you shouldn't be able to say whatever you want. That you can't say, that somebody, that you don't like somebody's color, or that you don't like, the way somebody acts, or you don't agree with their politics. They said, no, you can't say that because they don't understand the First Amendment. And so what do they want to do? And look, I don't agree with a lot of the things that people say, but it doesn't mean that I have the right to stop them from feeling or saying what they want. But unfortunately, the way society has molded is that now it's become a place where if you don't feel what those with the biggest mouths feel, you are going to be pressured into either converting to what they feel or shutting your mouth and going away because you could lose your job. In the case of Hollywood or teachers, hospitals, you could severely have your career hampered. You won't get promotions, all kinds of things. So we have, before today occurred, we've had a real problem. What infuriates me about today is that the school systems and the Department of Education allowed this to happen without any concern for the parents, whether they wanted it or not, without any concern with the fact that they may be indoctrinating children to act spontaneously against the Constitution rather than looking for other solutions first. There was no concern with public safety. Putting these kids out on the street when we can't even protect them in the school, we're lucky. We are lucky that some crazy person didn't shoot up a bunch of kids today. We're very lucky that didn't happen, or drive a truck or a car. Look, if these terrorists, these Islamic terrorists were smarter, we would have a lot more dead people in this country. Thank goodness they are not the warriors that we breed. Thank goodness. Because from a threat assessment evaluation, taking these, announcing that you're going to take kids out of school, announcing that you're going to have them parade around in an environment where you're worried about kids being killed. Is it just me? Does anyone else see the ridiculous stupidity of that? That alone should have stopped it. And they should have had discussions about how do you react in a school shooting. Do we have a plan? Have we ever done a threat assessment on the school? Do the students know where they should go? Do we know how we can barricade the doors? I didn't hear any of that. Or their lessons learned from Florida in the school that got shut up. Besides the fact that the kid was allowed to not be arrested or incarcerated because of a policy that these jackasses down there in Orlando, in Broward County enacted. That's the sheriff, Scott Israel, one of the weirdest people of all time, and the superintendent down there at the school got together, and under the pressure from the Obama administration around the country, they basically stopped arresting kids for doing bad things. And so they, in an instant, changed their entire their entire statistics of how many kids, because Broward County had one of the highest arrest rates of youths in the country. And that's because it's a rough place. So instead of fixing the youth and fixing the families and upping the amount of discipline and authority given to law enforcement to crack down on this stuff, instead of giving the teachers the right to paddle again and enforcing corporal punishment on kids and kicking them out of school and putting them in truancy and making them feel the effects of the law, no, they didn't do that. They just simply stopped arresting people. And so this kid, he wasn't a kid, he's 19 years old, was never arrested, was in multiple fights, multiple times threatening people that they was going to shoot this or shoot that, and nothing was ever done about it because of a policy to get better statistics. I didn't hear anybody on the news talking about that. I didn't hear any of these young people who, quite frankly, should shut their mouths and go to class and learn before they ever open their mouths, because they don't know what they're talking about. They've never lived outside of their mom's house and their dad's house. They've never worked and had to survive on their own. They should shut their mouths. And none of them were talking about this. Why? Because they don't know. They don't know. They're immature young adults. That's what we've created in this country. So I wrote an op-ed today. I'm not going to read the whole thing because I'm going to submit it. Basically because of this Looney Tune that decided to come on Facebook from a meme that I posted today, talking about how this was communist motivated. And first of all, if you're going to come on and debate me about something, don't come on calling me a half-wit or a moron or any of this stuff. You know, that's not the way that automatically is going to kill any debate you're going to have with me, because I don't falter to that. I don't get sucked into stuff. And quite frankly, if that's the way you approach an argument, you know, maybe you're the half-wit. You know, maybe you're the one who doesn't know how to see. A debate shouldn't just be between educated people, shouldn't just be I'm right and you're wrong. It should be, this is my position, that's your position. We both basically want the same thing. Is one of us off? Are both of us right? That's the way a true debate should be, but that's not the way people want to handle these things. So I wrote this this op-ed today. Let me pull it up here, and there's one thing in there that I will say. And that is, I don't want to read the whole op-ed because I'm going to see if somebody will pick this up. But this is basically the biggest thing in this op-ed, is that I came up with this short, what I call a good and proper test of validity for any suggestion to further amend the Bill of Rights. It's simple, and it's only 3 questions. Question number 1. Have all of the solutions to the problem been acted upon or even considered? In the case of the Second Amendment, I mean, you could look at any of these things, First Amendment, whatever. If the other solutions, besides changing or affecting or infringing on the Bill of Rights, has not been looked at or even considered, then you cannot change or even touch the Constitution. Second question. Will the changes suggested to the Bill of Rights allow for a stronger centralized government or diminished individual ability to live freely without retribution from the government? If the answer to either of these questions is yes, then you can't touch the Constitution. It's that simple. The last one is strengthening the central government, the foundation of the movement or individual's ideology that is attempting to solve issues by changing or weakening the Constitution. In other words, is strengthening the central government the motivation for changing this Constitution that we have that holds our rights? And if that's the case, if that answer is yes, the Constitution must remain intact. And I would suggest that the people that are trying to change the Constitution so that either their ideology or their motivation is to strengthen the centralized government, then they should be investigated for the crime of betraying one's country, especially by attempting to kill the sovereign or overthrowing the government. And that's what that typically is. That's what that is. When you are knowingly or unknowingly working for an ideology that wants to subvert the Constitution, you are committing treason. Now, Rick Unger tried to say once on a show that you can't commit treason unless you're at war. That is not true. That is not true. Treason, as I just gave you the definition, is betraying one's country. When you betray the Constitution, when you try to change the Constitution so that you can have a more powerful centralized government so that in hopes you can abolish the Constitution, you are in effect betraying the country and trying to overthrow the government. That is the definition of treason. So that's the three-pronged test that I give when I look at these things. And you may, this is another hilarious thing. I got to show you this meme. A good dear friend of mine sent this meme. And this is what's interesting about this. It says, of course, this is one of these memes. When the Founding Fathers wrote the Second Amendment, guns fired 1 round per minute. Now, I'm sure there was some hot shot out there with the musket that could reload it faster than a minute. Today's rifles have a cyclical rate of 600 plus rounds per minute. That's for a fully automatic weapon. So right off the bat, the meme is a lie. Maybe it's time we stopped using 18th century laws to regulate 21st century weapons. So whoever made this meme, first of all, they put the picture of a 240 Gulf on with a musket, and the weapon that they put on there you can't own unless you are a licensed arms dealer and or you're the military. You're not going to own that weapon. It's a fully automatic belt-fed weapon. You're not going to own it. So the meme is complete, but it looks big and it's ominous. But where they really missed the mark here is that they say maybe it's time we stop using 18th century laws to regulate 21st century weapons. Folks, the Second Amendment is not a gun law. Now let me rephrase. Let me say that again. The Second Amendment is not a gun law. It's not a right so that you can own guns. That is part of it, that your right to bear arms should not be infringed upon. But you have to look at the rest of the Second Amendment and why the Second Amendment is there. The Second Amendment exists, and again, this is not so much of a show about the Second Amendment as it is about the Bill of Rights and people's eager and rapid movements to and thinking that they can change the Constitution and it will make everything right. The Second Amendment is not an 18th century law that regulates weapons. The Second Amendment is a right that is given to you and to the people as a whole so that we can sustain the freedoms that these individuals, these founding fathers, these educated, well-versed, and proven individuals, highly experienced. They weren't the Ivy League grads that you have now that graduate from Harvard and go straight to Washington, D.C. and muck everything up. These were people that had educations. They spoke multiple languages. They'd been all over the world. They had fought against tyranny. They lived under tyranny. They understood the reality of what it took not only to break away from a tyrannical government, but to sustain the freedom that they believed that God had granted every man. Now, I know the other argument that people are going to have, and I'll talk about that in a second. The Second Amendment is your bodyguard for the rest of your amendments. The Second Amendment was not necessarily formed so that you could have a hobby of collecting guns. The Second Amendment has a serious purpose, and that serious purpose is not necessarily hunting. Although that's one of the reasons why people had guns back then. The Second Amendment was written so that you could protect your freedoms, the rest of the freedoms, from a tyrannical government. And now people will want to say to me, oh, come on, listen, a tyrannical government, they fled Europe and we haven't had a tyrannical government. We're their superpower. Listen, our biggest national security threat right now is not ISIS or Islam. It is our government. It is politicians that don't care about you or me or the Bill of Rights or the Constitution. They don't care about your children being safer in school. These are politicians that are either so far left that they're communists and they literally want and believe in a utopia that would come about through any means necessary, forced division and forced conflict, that they believe through that conflict a synthesis will occur where all peoples will finally say, listen, let's just stop fighting and let's be one. Not going to happen. These are people that believe the means justify the end. And then on the other side, you have basically organized crime. People who get up there and they make so much money through government, through the job that we've elected them for, that they just simply don't care anymore as long as they're making money. That is the biggest national security threat that we have, and that is the verge of a tyrannical government. They may not be a king and a queen up there in Washington, D.C., but they are, in effect, kings and queens, because you, as we've seen over the past couple of years, you cannot touch them. They will not go to jail. How many politicians do you know outside of your local government that have gone to jail and stayed there and not came back to run again, or just didn't even go to jail for things that would have put any of us in prison for a long, long, long time? Think about it. Name me one. It doesn't exist. So the fact is, the Second Amendment is your bodyguard. It is the bodyguard of the Bill of Rights. We are closer to a tyrannical government than we've ever been before. And is it because the government is so powerful? That's part of it. And when I say the government, I mean those ruling elites that live in Washington, D.C. and sit in these altars that we, for some reason, elect them to, that are owned by these two political parties, the Democrat and Republican committees. But the other problem is exactly what we saw today, is that people refuse to understand the importance of the Second Amendment and not even approaching, not even contemplating or considering the idea of messing with the Constitution before all other things are looked at. And we're not doing that at all. The American people are not doing that. They go straight to the Second Amendment. They got a problem with that? Let's go change the Second Amendment. People got killed? Let's go to the Second Amendment. They don't realize what happened in Florida could have been stopped 39 times. It could have been stopped the day of had they done the right threat assessments on that school and put security procedures in place. None of that was done. It could have been stopped if the school safety officer was there doing his job, which he was not. It could have been stopped if policies were changed, not the Second Amendment, if policies were changed. So my challenge is to anybody watching this show that is a staunch believer now that AR-15 should not be available and that anybody under the age of 21 should not have a gun. Here's my challenge to you. Do your research. 34 is the average age of a mass shooting. The majority of murders committed with guns in this country are done with pistols, and the majority of them are done with illegally owned weapons, illegally purchased weapons. And again, the average age is 34. So the whole thing, the foundation of this belief that the AR-15 is the most evil gun is incorrect right off the bat. So I challenge you, before you make the argument to affect the Second Amendment, why don't you go out and do your research and present other ways that we can fix this problem first? Then we could have a discussion about that. But you won't do that. And I can guarantee you, you could right now outlaw AR-15s in the United States. And I can guarantee you there'll be another mass shooting. And I can guarantee you that the left will go after those guns. Because they will. They already have. But if you're not in full understanding of your Second Amendment, if you don't realize that it is the bodyguard of the rest of the Constitution, if you don't realize that there are other solutions and that the majority of these problems that we have with guns have occurred because we have dumbed down our young adults, that we have taught learned helplessness in schools, that we have given opinions and voices to people that have zero experience in life, and we've given them a platform to voice those uneducated opinions, inexperienced opinions. If you don't realize that, then your argument about the Second Amendment has no ground. So I advise you, take a step back, remove the emotion, and do a thorough analysis of the problem. And what you're going to see is that we have a security problem, we have a leadership problem, we have a learned helplessness problem, we have a dependency problem, we have a lack of parenting problem, we have an indoctrination problem, we have a communism problem. Those problems are not being looked at. Come to me with those solutions and we will have a debate or a discussion or whatever you want. But if you simply say, school shooting, guy was 19, nobody under the age of 21 should have a gun, that is not going to stop the majority of killings in this country, since the average age is 34. It doesn't make any sense. The other argument I've gotten is that they just shouldn't, kids shouldn't have guns until they're at least 19. A friend of mine said that. I went and looked up the stats of how many kids between the ages of 16 and 19 were killed in car crashes last year. Couldn't find it for last year, but for 2015, almost 3,000 kids were killed in car crashes, and over 240,000 were severely injured in car crashes. So should we not allow them into cars? And people say, now you're just being ridiculous. Am I being ridiculous? I don't think I'm being ridiculous. I think over 60 kids this year were killed by Tide Pods. And you don't see anybody raising a ruckus about that. Heroin I can't even begin to describe the rampage that heroin is having now. I read a story in about Colombia last year or the year before that where they said they had a flurry of suicides by heroin overdose. Well, that's not a suicide. That is somebody who's high on dope and probably done it before, and they took too much and they died. Okay? That's a problem. But you don't see walkouts from schools. You don't see protests about heroin. That's because, listen to me very closely. If you're a leftist, or I don't want to say leftist, I don't care what you think if you're a leftist. If you're a liberal, if you're a friend of mine, if I don't know you, but you're liberal, listen to me very closely. If you're conservative, but yet you think there might be some validity to taking away AR-15s, raising the age, and basically infringing on the Second Amendment, listen to me very closely. The reason they are not walking out of schools because of the heroin epidemic, but they are about 17, which has killed, 20,000 or more young people last year. The reason, I think it's way more than that, but the reason why they're not walking out and protesting that is because the people that are the foundation or the voice of these movements against the Second Amendment are communist. Plain and simple. You can think I'm ridiculous. You can think, oh, there's no way. Do your research. The 3 women that started Black Lives Matter, communist. The NAACP was started by communists. You can go down the line. Antifa, communist. They confess to be communist. But yet people will refuse to look at the reality. They will refuse to look at the reality of what the agenda is that these people push forward. But that's why you don't see the walkouts over heroin or the car crashes or abortions in which billions of lives are snuffed out around the world. You're not seeing a walkout, not even in a Christian school. Because that doesn't matter to their communist globalist agenda. You being disarmed, that's what matters to them. Even far beyond that, why do they want us to be disarmed? So that your constitutional rights can be weakened. Remember, it's not so much about the Second Amendment as it is eliminating the bodyguard of the other rights. You have to remember that. You should never allow that to happen. If you're a parent and you got to go stand out there and punch anybody that comes in the school that has a gun and put your life on the line, you should do that so that your kids continue to have a bodyguard for the rest of the amendment of the rights in their Constitution. Let me just say that one more time because there's so much stuff going on here with people discussing this that I can't quite keep up with what you guys are saying. If kids are dying by Tide Pods, if young people are dying by the thousands in car crashes, if literally tens of thousands are dying because of heroin, or billions of lives are being snuffed out through abortion, why is it that people are not walking out of schools and that community leaders or school administrators are not pressing upon the young people to go out and stand in and explaining the political causes that for these different things that they should stand up for, just like they did with this one. All the teachers, all these people were there pushing and egging these young kids on to walk out. Why is that not the case? Because ultimately, those that are pushing, organizing and pushing any type of protest against the Second Amendment are communist-based. They are globalist, whatever you want to call it, socialist, progressive, communist-based minded people that want to diminish the Second Amendment, not because they hate guns, but because they want to weaken your ability to protect the rest of your rights. That is what you must understand. That is what this whole show is about. I'm long-winded, but ultimately that is it. They want to weaken the Constitution. And in order to do that, they got to do basically, a couple things. They need to go after Christianity, which they've done. They need to go after the family unit, which they've done. They need to force people into believing that they should be dependent on the government, which they've done. They must cause division amongst the people and make them grumble about stuff that most people don't even have a problem with, which they've done. Even in the case of where the equal rights movement, where the other thing I was going to say about the Bill of Rights is, as the equal rights movement came about and people's rights to be equal flourished, of all colors and all sexualities and all genders, the constitutional rights never changed. The rights did not change. There may have been things in there that changed as to whether or not somebody was a whole person or not. Yes, that changed. Culture changed, and rightfully so, but the rights never changed. That's important for you to realize. So all these things, all of these different things are caused by communist subversion. That's how they get a country as big as the United States to fall. They finally realized they're not going to come in here like Red Dawn and shoot up the place. They are going to have to cause the country to become weak, and as it starts to fall over, they can then pull it down. Because once you take away the Second Amendment, it weakens the rest of the Constitution. The people do not have the ability to protect themselves from a tyrannical government. And if you think that won't happen, you're kidding yourself. All you have to do is study history. There's never been a time in history where the peoples did not have the ability to unite, to organize, and to protect themselves, that a tyrannical government did not step in. There's never been a time in history. So why would it change? Folks, you want your mind blown. If you've never done this before, read the Bible. Start in the Old Testament, read it through like a book. It gets a little slow in places, but when they go through the genealogies, but look at who they're talking about. That was thousands of years ago in recorded history. Those same people are fighting today. Turn the TV on, while you're reading the Bible, you're going to see the same people. It'll blow your mind. If that's the case, and you look through the Bible, and I'm looking, I say the Bible, there's other books that I'm sure that you could get the behaviors the same, but if you look at the Bible and you look at the behaviors of the human beings, adultery, look at the 10 Commandments. Everything God points out in the 10 Commandments is exactly the behavior that people have today when they get in trouble. So why, if that is the case, and human behavior has never changed, if the people that were fighting 2,000 years ago are still fighting today, why would you ever think that if you gave up your ability to defend yourself, that nefarious, tyrannical forces wouldn't come in? Because that is the way it's always been 100% of the time throughout history. If you don't listen to history, history will be, it is going to repeat itself. It's destined to repeat itself. The only thing that stands in the way of that is us. I had to use nefarious at least once, Rob. So, I hope that you all get that. I hope that you understand this, because I'm not yes, I've been a SEAL, okay? I've been a SEAL. I'm not going to hide that. I've been an FBI agent. But I'm not as much of a gun nut as you would think. I love to shoot, trust me. I love to shoot, and I love I love to go out and be tactical. That's why I still do things I still do protection details and things like that. I love to be froggy, but I'm not somebody who has a collection of 30 guns, and I'm not somebody who all my Instagram posts are me on the range. That's not me. But I have a full understanding of what the Bill of Rights actually is and how important those Bill of Rights actually are, and how much effort went into the thought process of crafting a Constitution and then a Bill of Rights. And they looked at history. They didn't just make this up. They looked at another Bill of Rights from the 1600s. They looked at some other different things and things that were written and happened in government throughout history, and they used those to craft our Bill of Rights. And they did it for the sheer fact that they believed all humans should have all of these rights, and they should have the ability to protect those rights from those that would want to take them away. That's what the Second Amendment is all about, and that is ultimately what the Bill of Rights is. It is your rights that the Founding Fathers believed God granted to every human. Many of the Founding Fathers did not want the Bill of Rights to be called the Bill of Rights or the amendments. They wanted it put into the Constitution. But like good lawyers that they were, they debated it back and forth, and they went back and forth, and finally they came up with a way to do it based on history the way it was done before. Many of them did not want that. They certainly didn't want it. Many of them didn't want it because they were afraid that the anti-federalists believed that if a strong centralized government was put in place to protect these rights instead of the states, that the federal government would get stronger and stronger. I can't say that they were wrong. But I don't know if the Founding Fathers ever envisioned that our own country, our own citizenry, would be the ones that sell out the Constitution. I don't know. But that's basically, and it's hard for me to understand that. You are an American citizen, you're free, you're born free, but yet you want to give up your rights and the one thing that protects and ensures those rights. I don't get it. All right. Let me look and see what everybody else is saying here. I hope that I made this clear to people, because I had a couple of friends write me and say that they don't agree with the AR-15 being legal. They don't agree with the necessarily the way the Second Amendment is, that it should change because we weren't the same as back in the day when the Founding Fathers were around. They had muskets, and that's how they fought wars. And I'm trying my hardest to inform them and the rest of the people that watch this show and the people that they're going to use this information and go out and talk to other people. I want to make sure that I'm being clear. So I'm going to say it again. The Bill of Rights were created by the Founding Fathers through great toil and research of history and understanding of their own experiences. The Bill of Rights were created so that your rights, your natural God-given rights as a human being, were spelled out exactly, so there was no guessing. And then they inputted in there the Second Amendment to protect the rest of those those rights. They put that in there to make sure you had the ability to stand against a tyrannical government, which we are closer to now than we've ever been before. I want you to understand that nothing that was talked about today on television will stop mass shootings, even if they got rid of AR-15s. Nothing. There was no talk of threat assessments or locking doors or getting a voluntary force of veterans and former law enforcement to stand guard. Nothing about arming teachers. Nothing about disciplining children or getting rid of bad policies to make sure that bad kids are not at these schools, and that a record shows up, and if they have mental issues that they're dealt with. None of that was talked about. It was a communist movement that was participated in by and organized by your teachers, by your principals and your superintendents, by your Department of Education. The president should be livid that this even happened. And it was made possible because the parents are not involved. That's it. So, if you get any heartburn with that, or if you still disagree, let me know. You can find me on Twitter, @JGilliam_seal. That's the best way, because I do go through all my tweets. A lot of times when I have a show like this, I get inundated by direct messages, and it's just too much for me to go through. You can try to direct message me, and but Twitter is really the best way. That way, other people can get involved in the debate. If you're not on Twitter, go join Twitter. It's not gonna. They're not gonna hunt you down or anything. So I'm eager to see what people think. Let's go to the Truth Zone. And don't forget, folks, the numbers came back up. I told you that Amazon changed their algorithm, I was told. And it's interesting because only some of the books that were selling really good took a nosedive. I went down to like 5,000 from around 1,000 on the bestseller list. Still number one in one category. It's come back up now to about 3,000. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. If you don't know how to do a threat assessment on your school, get this book. If you own a factory, you can do the threat assessment using this book. If you're a mom or a dad, or if you're a single woman that lives alone, get this book. It'll show you how to do threat assessments on your, not just where you live or where you work, but every aspect of your life. And it helps you look at it from the attacker's point of view. Remember, very few people in this country are trained to think like attackers. I'm one of them. Other guys in the special forces they think that way as well. We are unconventional warriors. We practice unconventional warfare. We are the ones that attack other countries on your behalf in an unconventional manner. That's what separates this book from others. I'm not just saying, you need to tie this rope to that rope, and I'm saying this is a guide for you to do the work. That's what separates this book from the others. Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival. That's it right there, in case you're looking for the design of the book. Let's go to the Truth Zone. Can I see? So, as you can see, I get a little sweaty when I'm talking about this stuff because I take it seriously. I don't say these things to argue. I'm not saying these things to belittle people who don't understand it. I do shows like this to help you either gain the knowledge that you need. And Regina, I see that you just joined. You're one of the main reasons why I did this show, so make sure you go back and watch it. I do this shows like this especially, so that you are armed with the knowledge that you should really already have. But because of the way this country has changed, we've gone over 240 years since the Constitution was written and the Bill of Rights were created. American citizenry just takes it for granted that it's there, and they think, well, we can modify the Second Amendment and everything will still be okay. We'll still have all our rights. That's not what history shows us. Remember, folks, if you want to be subverted, if you want to be conquered by an outside enemy, or in this case, an enemy from within, you really only have to do two things. Take no action and do no studying of history. If you just get comfortable and you forget about history and why our Constitution is written the way it is, you're going to be fooled any chance that the communist, the globalist, the atheists or any of these other people, these nefarious politicians, organized crime, all up in Washington, D.C., you will fall victim to them if you don't study history. It is imperative that you understand why the Founding Fathers did that. And if you don't understand why weakening any part of the Constitution is dangerous, then you don't understand the Constitution. I know I've repeated myself 100 times tonight, but the fact is, people don't get it. I say it, they don't get it. I've learned from reading the critiques of this book that you can lay it all out for people. And you know what they'll end up saying is, this guy doesn't do anything but repeat himself. Or this guy goes and tries to make himself look like he knows everything. I'm not doing that. I'm not trying to make you all think I'm smarter than you. I'm trying to help you understand somehow we've gotten away from this. But because of the jobs that I've had, because of the things that I've done in my life, because of the way I was raised, I understood. I majored in political science and psychology. I know how people think. I know how bad people think. And I know how fragile the Constitution is. I'm trying to share that knowledge with you. So if you find me repeating things over and over, it's because I'm trying to get you to see reality and clear out the fog caused by indoctrination that you've been going through. It's real, folks. It's not fake. Russia, when they went from communist to whatever they are, all the KGB did was take off their uniforms and put on suits. Who do you think Putin is? He's KGB. They didn't stop their war against this country. In fact, they got stronger because they got more covert. I'm Jonathan Gillum. My old buddy Rico's right down here next to me. This is the experts. And folks, this is your country. These are your rights. And the Second Amendment is your ability to ensure nobody infringes upon the rest of those rights. The truth has arrived. How many of you are prepared for an incident like this? Get my new book, Sheep No More, The Art of Awareness and Attack Survival, and I will teach you to think like an attacker so you can truly defend yourself. Don't just react, act. Available for pre-order now on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Sheep No More. Get it.